They watched Earth through 100 telescopes, analyzed its data, and laughed. To the Galactic Empire, Earth was a backwater, primitive orb too distracted by internal squabbles to comprehend real power. Their species hadn't even colonized their own solar system properly, let alone joined interstellar society. And yet Earth pulsed with something unsettling, something not measurable by scans or probes, that made the high strategos uneasy. But unease was not allowed in the Council's chamber. It was seen as weakness. The declaration was sent without ceremony. A digital burst through the void, carrying the words of domination dressed up as diplomacy. Submit or be restructured. Earth didn't respond. Not out of confusion, but choice. Surveillance crafts dispatched to monitor human readiness failed to return. The Empire chalked it up to system anomalies, not sabotage. That was their first mistake. The Empire saw war as theater, bound by tradition, metrics, and control. Earth saw war as survival, and humans didn't play by anyone's rules but their own. The First Fleet arrived over Earth with polished hulls and synchronized formation, expecting capitulation or panic. Instead, silence. Not silence of fear, but calculation. The fleet initiated atmospheric insertion protocols. That's when the jamming began. Not primitive frequency static, but something far more refined, disruptive, precise, and untraceable. The Empire's warships lost guidance systems mid-descent. One collided with another. 3 plummeted into the Pacific. The rest hovered in disarray, forced to operate manually. Confusion spread among command deck. Why were humans interfering at this level of sophistication? This wasn't in the models. Orbital bombardment commands were issued. Nothing launched. Fire control subroutines were overwritten by external code injected milliseconds before execution. Code written in languages no Imperial AI could parse, accompanied by notes that read, "Try again." The Empire didn't realize Earth hadn't merely advanced. It had evolved. Their second mistake. Human intelligence agencies hadn't waited for first contact. They had reverse-engineered every scrap of alien tech found in deep space wrecks, black site recoveries, and intercepted signals. While the Empire debated protocols, humans built silent defenses in places no satellite could see. The Empire's second wave landed manually, infantry in sleek armor confident in their advantage. But the landing sites were empty. No opposition, no resistance. Just abandoned infrastructure, until the traps sprung. Gravity shifts localized to square kilometers. Weaponized physics. Entire platoons crushed under their own weight or flung into the sky. Remaining units tried to regroup, only to find that their maps didn't match reality. Buildings moved. Streets led nowhere. Augmented humans, non-military civilians, disrupted every attempt at coordination. They didn't fire a shot. They manipulated outcomes. The Empire realized the humans had not just trained soldiers. They had adapted the battlefield itself. The Council sent an envoy ship to demand terms. It disappeared. Not shot down. Gone. Its last broadcast looped endlessly. "We'll decide when we speak." The third mistake. Earth wasn't defending. Earth was studying. Probing. Learning. Not for defense. For dominance. It wasn't just humans resisting. It was the planet. Artificial weather anomalies isolated entire divisions. Drones. Autonomous, self-replicating, and undetectable, erased supply caches and communication lines. By the time the Empire tried retreating, they discovered their own warp gates had been hijacked. They weren't blocked, they were redirected. An entire fleet reappeared over Jupiter. It was still there. But every ship had been gutted from within. Not destroyed. Clean. No bodies. No damage. Just silence. What happened inside those ships was still unknown. But the final transmission received from the fleet's flagship was a single, human voice. "You don't understand what we are." Yet, that was enough to induce panic at the highest levels of the Empire. For the first time in recorded history, An emergency session of the Corps rulers was called without protocol clearance. The footage of that session leaked 2 days later. Not by accident, by intent. Earth wanted them to see fear. Human fear had been underestimated for millennia. But nothing terrified the Empire more than human calm. Earth issued its own message. It wasn't a surrender. It wasn't even a negotiation. It was an invitation. You declared war. We accepted. Now watch. They did. From hidden observatories, the Empire's analysts recorded the restructuring of battlefields into data harvest zones. Human forces, many of whom were never seen, reduced entire battalions into confusion and retreat using nothing more than disruption. No human command center was visible. That's because there wasn't one. Human decision-making had become decentralized, predictive, and iterative. Every act of war committed by the Empire had already been anticipated and answered in silence. The high strategos suggested escalation. Biological weapons, psychological warfare, AI swarm overloads. Earth's reply was surgical. A bioplague meant for human soil rerouted itself mid-deployment and infected the labs that designed it. The AI swarm, upon launch, turned on the ships that deployed them. No enemy could control a war they didn't understand, and Earth had made war into a language only humans could speak. At this point, the Empire deployed their ultimate asset, a genetically designed species of war beasts with no fear, no hesitation, and no ethics. They were dropped on Earth like meteors. They never landed. Satellite feeds captured images of them disintegrating midair, their DNA unraveling in real time. It wasn't a weapon. It was incompatibility. Earth had become uninhabitable not by environment, but by design. They had turned biology into a firewall. Nothing alien could survive without being rewritten. The council met again. No grand speeches this time. Just one question: why didn't humans attack directly? The answer came not from Earth, but from the council's own data vaults. A transmission buried in a long decommissioned server. A human voice: "You came here to rule. We came here to end rulers." That wasn't rebellion. That was resolution. Humans weren't reacting. They were waiting. And now, the waiting was over. The Empire tried to pivot. Offered alliances. Reparation deals. Even invitations to the core. Earth ignored all of them. Not out of arrogance, but disinterest. Humanity had seen what the Empire offered and found it obsolete. They weren't aiming to be part of the Galactic Order. They were building something else. Something independent. Untouchable. Every signal from Earth carried the same signature: disconnection. The Empire initiated a galaxy-wide blackout of Earth data. Any species caught communicating with humans would be cut off from core privileges. It didn't work. Species began defecting. Not to Earth, but away from the Empire. Rumors spread of trade routes stabilizing, of technology leaps in minor systems, of coordinated AI protocols never before seen. All of it traced back to anonymous packets which bore Earth's fingerprint. Earth wasn't building an empire. It was deleting one. On the outer rim, a group of human envoys met with a coalition of fringe world. No demands, no threats. Just one offer: we teach you what they won't. You choose the rest. The worlds agreed. Not out of desperation, but inspiration. They had seen. They called it the response protocol, but it was never meant to be a response. It was a calibrated, deliberate sequence of planetary assertion designed for one outcome: to remind anyone watching that Earth wasn't part of the galactic hierarchy by permission, but by precedent. The moment the Empire's first fleet dissolved in the upper atmosphere, Earth's war doctrine transitioned without hesitation. They didn't scramble. They executed. Across Allied command centers, a single signal pulsed out: red line. It wasn't a command. It was a fact. The orbital defense grid shifted in seconds, shattering the illusion of static infrastructure. Stations masquerading as communications hubs detached magnetic anchors and realigned into weapons platforms. Civilian satellites blinked out, replaced by arrays of countermeasures hiding behind repurposed weather stations. Civilian aerospace corporations, government adjacent in every practical way, initiated firewalls that kicked sleeping algorithms awake. These weren't warships in orbit. They were hammers suspended in glass, waiting for justification. The Galactic Empire, for all its scope, never anticipated systemic response from a species they assumed was still stumbling through political adolescence. They didn't expect that Earth had watched every empire rise with hubris and fall with ceremony. The Empire had expected chaos. Instead, they were met with choreography. Every human fleet jumped not toward the core of the Empire but into the space between. The void the Empire left behind in its arrogance. Systems conquered but unloved, outposts fortified but abandoned, colonies taxed but forgotten. That was where Earth struck. Precision over posture. The first systems to fall weren't critical to galactic supply lines. They were symbolically irrelevant, until Earth took them without resistance and turned them into message boards. Every broadcast, every communication, every beacon from those captured systems told a single story. This is what happens when you threaten Earth. Empire Command tried containment. They rerouted cruisers, issued new orders, elevated local governors to emergency authority. None of it mattered. Human strike teams moved in mathematically impossible ways. No pattern, no repetition. A dozen jumps in one cycle. No fleet moved the same way twice. Every engagement lasted seconds. One by one, the Empire's support chains began to rot, not because of overwhelming firepower, but because the humans never gave them the luxury of a straight fight. Empires are built on the assumption of time. Time to mobilize, to respond, to intimidate. Earth gave them none. Every delay was punished. Every hesitation exploited. In the third week, Earth's first major fleet, Task Force Orion, made a direct jump into the Voltrax sector, an Empire fortress system with 17 reinforced moons. They didn't invade. They announced. A broadcast in clear, unencrypted channels. You have 10 minutes. Not to surrender. To leave. 9 minutes later, every Empire ship initiated an emergency warp. The fleet didn't flee because of losses. They hadn't taken any. They fled because the humans didn't lie. The Voltrax moons were never hit with kinetic weapons. Instead, Earth triggered a coordinated shutdown of the moon's power cores, leveraging ancient protocols buried in the Empire's own infrastructure. Left behind was darkness, silence, and a trail of zero-casualty victories that spread through the outer Empire like infection. Back in the galactic core, the political center of the Empire fragmented. Senators screamed for retaliation. Generals demanded reinforcements. Civilian populations, who'd never heard Earth's name spoken with anything but contempt, now listened to it in every report, every hushed corridor. Earth was doing the unthinkable, not just fighting the Empire, but undoing it. The Empress herself ordered the Black Armada to deploy. 8 fleets, each older than Earth's recorded space age, constructed with technologies deemed sacred, rarely used. They weren't just ships. They were relics, mobile temples of power, destruction made into faith. The Armada had only ever been deployed once before. That war ended with a species extinction. Earth didn't flinch. They didn't match the Black Armada with size or show. They sent a single vessel, Erebus. Not the most powerful, not the most advanced, but uniquely human, designed not to win a battle, but to prevent one from ever starting. The Erebus didn't attack. It offered data, transmitted directly into the Armada's command cores, simulated outcomes of confrontation, not predictions, calculations, battle trajectories, resource projections, casualty estimates, Empire stability curves over 5 years. Every single simulation ended the same way, not with Earth victorious, but with the Empire no longer existing in any functional capacity. There were no warnings, no gloating, just raw information. The admirals of the Black Armada debated. Not aloud, not in council, but in the silence of realization. They were loyal to the Empire, yes, But they were not suicidal. Erebus offered them something the Empire never did, a chance to walk away before they became history. 5 of the 8 fleets turned. Quietly. Without announcement. The other 3 engaged. Erebus didn't fire. It just vanished, slipped into folded space. Minutes later, those 3 fleets began shutting down, subsystem by subsystem. Lights dimmed. Thrusters failed. Targeting arrays returned zeros. They weren't destroyed. They were reduced. The humans never touched them physically. They simply reminded the ships of what they were: code, protocol, circuitry. And humans had learned how to speak that language better than their creators. By week 6, the Empire's outer systems no longer answered central commands. Not because they were destroyed, but because they had defected. Human diplomats, if they could even be called that, offered each system a single deal. Not protection. Not resources. Choice. No overlords. No taxes. No new flags. Just a singular rule: you don't threaten Earth. Ever. Most systems agreed in silence. A few objected. Those few experienced technical failures of their planetary defense systems. Within hours they changed their minds. Within the Imperial Court, panic fermented into paranoia. Assassinations multiplied. Old alliances frayed. For the first time in living memory, the Empress stood alone. Her court watched her, not with reverence, but calculation. Earth had achieved what decades of internal resistance could not. They made obedience look foolish. In desperation, the Empire activated the sphere, a weapon not even recorded in official histories. A construct built in secret generations ago. Not a ship, but a singularity manipulator. Designed to consume entire star systems. It was never tested. Earth, somehow, already knew. Before the sphere could charge, its core destabilized. No attack. No sabotage. A simple transmission entered its control loop. You built it. We finished it. Then it collapsed into itself. The system it was in vanished in a silent ripple of folded space, never to be seen again. The Empress, now isolated in a palace surrounded by suspicion, broadcast a final message. It was not surrender. It was a declaration of ignorance. We underestimated you. We assumed you were like us. That was our error. The cleanup after an empire's fall is never about rubble, it's about rewriting truth. In the weeks that followed the final Empire broadcast, Earth didn't expand. They didn't occupy. They deleted. Files, archives, surveillance nodes, networks of enforced loyalty, erased with precision. What remained were independent systems blinking in the dark, adjusting to the realization that their overseer was gone. No transition of power. No new flag to salute. Earth didn't fill the void. They made sure no one else could either. Across former imperial territories, silence spread, not out of fear but disbelief. The war had ended without a treaty. No official surrender. No ceasefire agreement. The Empire simply stopped functioning. Entire sectors reported to no one. Military governors vacated posts. Highborn aristocrats shredded their own titles before someone asked them to explain their bloodline's allegiance. Without Earth raising a single banner, the idea of dominance collapsed. In private, leaders of liberated systems met with representatives from Earth. These weren't diplomats. They didn't offer alliances or trading posts. They came with portable hard drives and final terms. No authority. No tribute. No demands. Just 2 files. One containing every instance of Earth's restraint, and another containing projections of what Earth could have done if they hadn't held back. That was the message. Earth didn't conquer. They proved they didn't need to. Former Imperial admirals attempted to regroup in shadow sectors. They believed they could reignite the structure. They didn't last a month. Earth had marked them before they even left their home systems. The moment their ships powered up, their navigational AI rerouted mid-jump, scattering their fleets into drift. Their messages home returned error code. Their own internal power cells refused to charge. Earth didn't destroy them. They let them survive with the knowledge that they had become irrelevant. Several planetary economies crashed under the weight of autonomy. They were built to serve, not to self-govern. Earth offered no guidance, no advisors, just silence. And that silence forced a choice: learn or collapse. Most chose to adapt. A few collapsed. Earth watched both outcomes with the same level of intervention: zero. Media throughout the galaxy tried to redefine the narrative. Some called Earth tyrants in disguise. Others tried to brand them as reluctant liberators. The stories didn't stick. Not because Earth responded, but because they didn't. They didn't defend their actions, didn't post declarations, didn't engage in galactic discourse. The narrative died from neglect. Earth became the name that shut conversations down. Not out of fear, but certainty. Everyone knew what had happened. No one wanted to be the next example. In former imperial academies, revised curriculums emerged. History courses no longer taught the inevitability of the Empire. Instead, they focused on the lessons of Earth. Not just their technology but their strategy, their psychology, how they weaponized minimalism, how they never fought more than needed, how every move was a signal, and every silence, louder than demands. Attempts to mimic Earth failed spectacularly. Systems tried creating shadow fleets, building predictive AIs, hiring humans as consultants. None of it worked. The pieces looked the same, but the intent didn't. Earth's strength wasn't in their tech, it was in their decisions. Their refusal to play by the rules everyone else assumed were fixed. They didn't conquer to win. They redefined the game so no one else could. A movement spread in the shadows of the void, unofficial, untraceable, but growing. Small groups, scattered across former Empire territory, began calling themselves observers. They weren't Earth operatives. They had no contact with human command. But they emulated the idea: quiet, efficient, accountable. Their mission wasn't dominance, it was memory. To make sure the fall of the Empire stayed a lesson, not a footnote. One planetary governor attempted to rise from the ashes by declaring war on Earth publicly. No fleets backed him. No worlds joined. His declaration was met with nothing. 3 weeks later, his own citizens deposed him, not because of Earth's response, but because of Earth's absence. When no retaliation came, they realized how unimportant they were to humanity's equation. And that realization shattered their pride faster than any orbital strike. Some former Imperial scientists defected voluntarily, bringing research, secrets, and stolen prototype. Earth rejected most of it. Not out of spite, but because they'd already solved those problems decades earlier. When they did accept a submission, they left no trace. The scientists vanished, placed somewhere unreachable, beyond even their own predictions. No fame, no medals, just silence. Earth's version of reward. In the galactic markets, Earth's influence bled into currency exchanges, trade rates, energy stabilizations. Not because they traded in volume, but because they never defaulted. Their economy became a benchmark. Stable, predictable, silent. Those who traded with Earth understood one principle: there were no second chances. If you lied, you disappeared. If you cheated, you failed. If you delivered, you were paid. In full. On time. No negotiations. And that, somehow, became more powerful than any empire's promise. Human culture, once dismissed as erratic and primitive, became an object of study. Not because of its art or philosophy, but because of its edge. The quiet understanding beneath everything they created, beauty wrapped in function, elegance shadowed by efficiency. Entire planetary universities dedicated courses to analyzing Earth's literature for hidden patterns. They found none. Earth wasn't hiding anything. That was the lesson. They never had to. Back on Earth, life moved forward. They didn't build a new capital. They didn't change their flags. They buried their fallen, improved their defenses, upgraded their listening arrays, and resumed normal operation. The war didn't redefine them. It confirmed them. They were prepared not because they feared the galaxy, but because they understood it. The Galactic Council attempted reformation. With the Empire gone, they assumed they could reassert control. Earth didn't apply for a seat. They didn't send a delegation. The Council reached out anyway. Earth replied once. A single line, time-stamped, authenticated. We remember who watched. That line unraveled half the Council. The rest tried to appease. It didn't matter. Earth didn't want a seat at the table. They'd already proven the table wasn't necessary. They didn't break the hierarchy. They made it irrelevant. Some surviving factions, remnants of the Empire's special units, gathered in the outer spiral. They whispered of revenge, resurrection, retaliation. Earth let them whisper. They sent no fleets, no threats, just a single surveillance drone, once every lunar cycle. Hovering, watching, reminding them that Earth hadn't forgotten, they just didn't consider them worth engaging. In time, those factions either dissolved or turned on each other. Earth never had to fire a shot. Their only weapon was history. Generations later, the maps still showed the scars. Sectors renamed. Systems reclassified. Old imperial territories now blank. And in every navigational database, a region was marked in red, not for danger, but out of respect. A warning, updated automatically, uneditable by any government or trader. Earth, unapproachable without cause.